Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She simply read one page and the entire room went quiet. Moments later, Barron Trump's stunned reaction was being watched across the globe. You could feel the shift through the screen, a tension thick enough to make changing the channel feel like a political act. It was Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. All three major networks had dropped their regular programming. No sitcoms, no game shows. Just one unbroken live feed trained on the Capitol. At its center, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, composed, focused, flanked by silent committee members. She sat in a sharp navy blazer, minimal jewelry, and a quiet strength that didn't need volume to be felt. This wasn't just another hearing. Something about her stillness, her readiness, it made it clear she knew exactly what she came to do. CNN's Chiron Reed. Live Oversight Committee, Crockett versus Trump officials. Nobody fully knew what was coming, but online speculation was already surging. That morning, Crockett had posted a simple message. Watch tonight. No drama, no threats, just confidence. In a quiet room in Fort Lauderdale, 19-year-old Barron Trump sat alone, watching. No aides, no family. Just the screen and the long shadow of his father's legacy hanging over him. Then Crockett spoke. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record 3 communications extracted under subpoena, verified and time-stamped, showing senior White House officials were aware of an offshore transfer protocol connected to the Cayman network. The words cracked the silence like thunder. One aide flinched. A Republican congressman shifted uncomfortably, and Crockett, calm as ever. She opened a binder and continued. This isn't speculation. It's not rumor, and it's no longer classified. These are internal memos showing unreported transactions through shell companies formed in Delaware, Cyprus, and Panama linked to the executive branch after January 2023. A quiet buzz filled the hearing room. The audio on the live stream picked up scattered whispers. But she didn't yield. She had the floor, and she intended to keep it. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. It held something stronger than anger, evidence. Viewers leaned in across the country as headlines began to scroll. Crockett alleges undeclared transfers, White House silent. In a CBS control room, a producer barked into a headset, "Stay on her. Don't cut away. Something's about to break." And it did. As Crockett stared down the committee, she delivered a simple line. "I didn't come here to make friends. I came to ask why no one has explained this to the American people." At that same moment, on split screen, Fox News showed Donald Trump's motorcade arriving back at the White House. Still no comment. Still no response. But silence wasn't going to last. The committee chair called for a brief recess. Crockett didn't flinch. She closed her binder slowly, then looked directly into the camera, into the homes of millions, and said, "If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. But if I'm not, we need to ask, who are we protecting, and why?" When the feed returned from the break, something had changed. The air in the room was heavier. Crockett was already seated, calmly flipping through a folder. But now her focus was on someone new. Conrad Wellner, former National Security Liaison turned special counsel to the Trump administration. He had a reputation for being unshakable. But tonight, he looked rattled. Holding up a single page, Crockett spoke. "Mr. Wellner, in May, you told this committee that to your knowledge, no off-book financial communications were ever initiated through the White House. Is that still your statement?" Wellner cleared his throat. "That is correct, Congresswoman." She nodded once and placed the page on the overhead screen. It was an email, time-stamped, from a private server. And suddenly, it was clear to everyone watching this wasn't just a political moment. It was the start of something much bigger. The subject line read, Routing Coordination Presidential Initiative. Wellner's name appeared in the from field. He didn't need to confirm it. The silence did that for him. "Is this your email?" Jasmine asked. "That depends on." The please answer directly. "Is that your name? Is that your address?" Wellner hesitated. That pause said more than any denial could. "Yes, that's my email." "Great," she said, folding her hands. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain why you forwarded encrypted routing instructions." Tied to an entity labeled Clearstream Holdings, just 48 hours after denying knowledge of these transfers. Wellner opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His legal advisor leaned in, whispering frantically. Cameras zoomed in. A single bead of sweat rolled from Wellner's temple. Crockett didn't wait. Because right now, Mr. Wellner, either you were left in the dark and lied under oath, or you weren't in the dark and still lied under oath. Either way, someone's about to be very unhappy. Wellner finally spoke, voice thin, cracking under pressure. "I'd like to clarify the context of that communication." "By all means," Jasmine said. "America's listening." Across the country, dorm rooms, diners, and quiet households sat frozen. In Sacramento, a political science student whispered, "She just caught him. That's perjury." In a Pennsylvania diner, a Trump-supporting couple stared at the screen, their coffee untouched. The woman said quietly, "If even half of this is true," and left it at that. Wellner tried to spin it. Those instructions were part of a pre-cleared initiative, an internal economic strategy, never disclosed to the Oversight Committee. Crockett cut in. And never approved by the Treasury Department, according to this statement signed just 2 days ago. She held up another document. Wellner looked down. This time, he didn't even pretend to object. The committee chair shifted again. He leaned into his mic, voice low. "Let's keep this professional, Representative Crockett." She didn't flinch. "With respect, Mr. Chairman, professionalism isn't the issue. Accountability is. And this tonight is the first time someone's bothered to ask why this administration is moving money through channels we're not even supposed to know exist." Journalists had their lead. Newsrooms scrambled to verify. Crockett held. "The Treasury memo, hi. I'm submitting this for the record. And if anyone wants to call it fake, they're welcome to go under oath and say so." No one spoke. But while Crockett held the room, somewhere else, another camera rolled. And what it captured would shift the entire conversation. Inside the West Wing, tension was building. Staffers paced tight circles, phones glued to ears. News feeds from C-SPAN, MSNBC, and Fox flickered in every corner. Security detail moved with sharpened urgency. Still, no word from the president. In the private residence, however, a very different scene was unfolding. Down a quiet hallway, in a restricted media room, 19-year-old Barron Trump sat alone in a leather chair. His eyes locked on the hearing. The TV volume was turned high. His foot tapped restlessly. His fingers drummed his thigh. He didn't normally watch this stuff, but tonight wasn't normal. His father wasn't in the room. Neither was Melania. He didn't know Jasmine Crockett personally. He'd seen clips, quick, sharp, brutal takedowns. But this was different. This wasn't performance. This was real. And it made him uncomfortable. Now she was reading from a memo, referencing presidential directives requiring absolute discretion. The language was vague. But even a college freshman could understand the implication. These transfers weren't just policy. They were authorized. Possibly from the top. Barron picked up his phone. His lock screen lit up with texts, classmates, cousins, even strangers. "Yo, is this real? You okay? Crockett is going OFF. Y'all need to answer for this." He swiped the notifications away. Back in the hearing, Crockett. stood alone. One official had asked for a delay. 2 others had refused comment. The chairman's discomfort was obvious. The camera panned across the tense panel, then cut unexpectedly to the White House feed. Producers had meant to show the press secretary preparing for a statement, but a feed operator switched too early. Instead, for 3 brief seconds, the nation saw Barron Trump. His face is panic. He looked down at his phone, then tossed it aside. His lips moved. He said something, but the audio was off. Visibly shaken, he stood abruptly, ran his hands through his hair, and disappeared off camera. 3 seconds. That's all it took. On X, formerly Twitter, #Barron Meltdown exploded. Screen recordings went viral. Speculation followed fast. Was he reacting to Crockett's words? Did he already know something? Had he heard something before the broadcast that made this all hit harder? Downstairs in the White House briefing room, the press corps pounced. Will the president address Representative Crockett's claims? Is the White House confirming or denying the existence of the Cayman Channel? Why was Barron shown during the live feed? And has he been briefed on any of this? Press Secretary Miranda Stokes stepped up to the podium stone-faced. No pleasantries. The White House is aware of the hearing and the claims being made. At this time, we believe Representative Crockett's assertions are theatrical and politically motivated. No evidence has been presented tonight that proves wrongdoing by the president. But the words fell flat. Clips of Wellner's fumbling. Answers were already trending. Inside the residence, Trump stood by a window, arms crossed, silent. Melania sat behind him, unreadable. She had asked earlier, "Did you know she had those documents?" He hadn't replied. A staffer entered quietly. "Sir, DOJ just called. They're asking if you're willing to make a statement within the hour, ... Also, ... Barron isn't answering his phone. He left the East Wing 10 minutes ago." Melania stood. "Where'd he go?" "We're not sure," the aide said. But he looked upset. Before they could regroup, Crockett was already moving. As the hearing resumed, she wasted no time. From her folder, she withdrew a sealed manila envelope and slid it to the clerk. No dramatic pause, just precision. "I'd like to introduce this packet as supplemental evidence." The camera zoomed in as the clerk opened it. Copies were distributed around the room. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, calm but razor-focused. Inside are financial tracking logs provided by a whistleblower from the Office of International Asset Control. They cover March through September of this year. The recipients include a shell company tied to a dissolved real estate firm in Nassau. One name appears on 3 separate transfers: Donald J. Trump. The room froze. No shuffling, no whispers. Just dead still. Representative Sean Bixler, longtime Trump loyalist, leaned forward. "Congresswoman, how do we know these logs are real? Anyone with a spreadsheet can fake numbers." Crockett didn't blink. "There's a forensic audit attached on the final page. The whistleblower isn't anonymous. She's ready to testify under oath. Her name is Dr. Loretta Naina-Santurna. Compliance officer for 14 years, resigned just last month. Her record is clean. Her credentials are public." Bixler flipped to the final page. There it was. Audit certified, stamped, signed. Jasmine continued. "This isn't about political rivalry. This is about public funds vanishing into untraceable accounts tied to private interests. This is about a president making policy changes that just so happen to benefit those interests." The chairman sighed, rubbing his temples. "Representative Crockett, are you making a formal allegation of misconduct against the president?" Jasmine's voice was steady. "No, Mr. Chairman, I'm presenting facts. The allegation speaks for itself." And across town, in a D.C. studio, political analyst Diana Holt was already live on air. Visibly shaken, he stood up, ran a hand through his hair, and walked off camera. It only lasted 3 seconds, but that was enough. On X, formerly known as Twitter, the hashtag Barron Meltdown exploded. Within minutes, screen recordings were everywhere, and speculation ran wild. Was it something Crockett said, or something he already knew? Had he heard something off camera before the broadcast began that made it all hit harder? Downstairs in the press briefing room, the questions were already flying. Will the president respond to Representative Crockett's allegations? Is the White House confirming or denying the existence of the Cayman Channel? Why? Was Barron shown on the live feed, and has he been briefed on any of this? White House Press Secretary Miranda Stokes took to the podium, face unreadable. The White House is aware of the hearing and the claims being made. At this time, we believe Representative Crockett's assertions are theatrical and politically motivated. No evidence was presented tonight that proves any wrongdoing by the president. But her words rang hollow, especially as clips of Secretary Wellner's nervous responses flooded the internet. Inside the residence, Donald Trump stood silently by a window, arms crossed. Melania sat behind him, expression guarded. "Did you know she had those documents?" she asked. He didn't respond. A staffer knocked, stepping in cautiously. "Sir, the DOJ just called. They're asking if you'll make a statement on air within the hour." Trump didn't move. And ... Barron isn't answering his phone. He left the East Wing 10 minutes ago. Melania stood abruptly. "Where'd he go?" "Not sure," the aide replied. "But..." He looked upset. Meanwhile, in the hearing chamber, Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. As the gavel fell and the hearing resumed, she reached into her folder and pulled out a sealed manila envelope. No dramatic pause, no build-up. Just motion. "I'd like to submit this packet as supplemental evidence," she said, sliding it to the clerk. Cameras zoomed in as the contents were distributed. Crockett leaned back, calm, steady-eyed. "These are financial tracking logs obtained by a whistleblower from the Office of International Asset Control, covering March through September. The records show transfers to a shell company in Nassau, tied to a now-defunct real estate firm. One of the beneficiaries is listed on 3 occasions as Donald J. Trump." The room went still. Even the sound of rustling papers felt too loud. Representative Sean Bixler, a Trump ally from Idaho, was the first to challenge her. "Congresswoman, how do we know these are authentic? Anyone can mock up a spreadsheet. There's a forensic audit on the final page." Crockett replied coolly. "And the whistleblower isn't anonymous. Her name is Dr. Loretta Nanes. She was the internal compliance officer for over 14 years. She's ready to testify under oath." Bixler flipped to the end. The audit was there, stamped, signed, certified. "Let me be clear," Jasmine said. "This isn't about hating the president. This is about taxpayer money vanishing into accounts we're not allowed to question. Private transactions aligning perfectly with sudden policy shifts. That's not a coincidence. That's a red flag." The chairman, exhausted, finally spoke. "Are you making a formal allegation of misconduct against the president?" "No, Mr. Chairman," she said evenly. "I'm presenting facts. The allegation writes itself." In a DC news studio, political analyst Diana Holt broke from her segment mid-sentence. "Hold on, are we really seeing account routing too? Offshore firms at the same time the president signed executive orders on construction tariffs. This... This is textbook conflict of interest. It's verified." Back in the chamber, Bixler tried again. "With respect, we've seen political theater before. I request a recess until we can verify these so-called logs." Before the chairman could respond, Crockett held up a redacted page. "That won't be necessary, because this isn't just about the transactions. It's about the memos instructing staff not to speak of them. This page It contains orders from someone identified only as DT. We traced the IP address used when it was sent. It came from a private server located inside Mar-a-Lago. The silence was instant. Reporters raced out, phones in hand. Staffers exchanged panicked glances. One quietly slid the evidence packet under the table and began texting. "I don't care which side of the aisle you sit on," Crockett continued. "If this were anyone else, you'd be demanding answers. So why is he exempt?" In the corner, a C-SPAN camera caught something unusual. Representative Deandre Casa, Trump loyalist, folding his arms and turning away, avoiding eye contact with Crockett. "We'll take a 5-minute recess," the chairman announced. But Crockett's voice lingered longer than his gavel. "Recess all you want. The documents aren't going anywhere." Back at the White House, a storm was brewing. CBS camera had gone live too early, accidentally feeding a raw interior. Shot meant only for behind-the-scenes coverage. And there was Barron Trump, pacing in the Roosevelt room, phone in hand, clearly mouthing, "She wasn't supposed to have that." He froze, staring at the screen where Jasmine Crockett's paused frame loomed large. His shoulders tightened. Then he hurled his phone across the room. It hit a cabinet hard. This time, the feed didn't cut in time. The moment was captured live. Within minutes, TikToks were edited, slowed, captioned. #Barron meltdown trended again. Some thought he had confirmed the leak. Others believed he'd just found out. Either way, the damage was done. In a secure hallway, Secret Service agents rushed in and escorted him out. Downstairs, a panicked aide ran into Miranda Stokes' press prep. "Ma'am?" The Barron feed went live. What part? All of it? The throw. The words. Stokes took a breath. "Tell the networks to go to holding graphics. Get the president on the line." But Trump was already watching. Silent, hands on the desk. Melania entered, slowly behind him, watching the footage on loop. "He's just a kid," she murmured. "He's 19, Trump replied coldly. "He knows better." "No," she said. "He knows the truth. That's the problem." Out in L.A., streamer Nolan Triggs was reacting live. "KOKF Barrons. Flipping out like that. This isn't smoke. This is fire. That kid's been quiet his whole life. And tonight, he cracked." That was real. In Baltimore, an AP reporter who'd covered the Trump family for years hit publish on the headline. "Barron Trump reacts on live feed as explosive hearing unfolds back in the hearing room." Jasmine read a folded note from her aide, nodded, and set it aside. The committee hadn't returned yet, but the air had shifted. Phones buzzed. The murmurs grew. "He's trending in 42 states. Someone whispered. Jasmine leaned toward her aide. "They're going to try to bury that. Means we're getting close." She looked down at one last sealed folder, the one she hadn't opened yet. Elsewhere in the White House, Barron sat alone again in a secure office. A half-eaten protein bar sat on the desk. His replacement phone vibrated nonstop. He picked it up. A message from an unknown number appeared on screen. She wasn't supposed to have it, but she did. Now he had a choice to make. He stared at the message on his phone for a long moment, then deleted the thread. But it was too late. The internet was already tearing apart every second of his reaction, and Jasmine was preparing to go even further. When the committee reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. The stiffness, the scripted decorum, it was all gone. What had once felt like political theater now carried the weight of something much more real. The public had seen the fractures. Jasmine was about to split them wide open. She sat tall, both hands resting on the last sealed folder in front of her. Her voice was calm, composed. The tension in the room didn't come from volume. It came from certainty. She looked like someone who had already seen how the story ends. "Mr. Chairman," she said, "There's one final document I'd like to enter into the record." Still visibly shaken from the earlier revelations, the chairman gave a quick nod. "Proceed." Jasmine opened the folder and lifted out a single page, hand-signed, on letterhead. The kind of document you don't email. The kind you lock away and hope no one ever finds. It was a letter from a former senior economic advisor, addressed to Chief of Staff Harlan Breeze, dated February of this year. The subject: how to respond if the Cayman Islands financial transfers ever became public. As the clerk stepped forward to distribute copies, Jasmine continued. "The language is deliberate, polished, but it's not vague." The letter detailed a plan: deploy favorable media, launch legal counterattacks, discredit whistleblowers, and label any congressional probe as a political stunt. Representative Bixler scanned his copy, eyes narrowing. This wasn't about hidden transactions anymore. This was about calculated intent. Jasmine tapped the page once, then laid it flat. In paragraph 3, line 2, she said, "You'll find this. We should anticipate resistance from oversight leaders, particularly the representative from Texas known for her courtroom flair." She paused. "That's me." The silence that followed was different. Not tension, realization. They weren't just hiding it, she said. They were preparing for it. Drafting strategies, media narratives, stall tactics before a single question had even been asked. No one shuffled paper. No one whispered. "That's why I'm here," she said. "Not for headlines. It's for protection. Not just minors." She let the next line land like a thunderclap. This isn't politics. This is protection. Social media got it first. Cable news caught up within minutes. Her image flashed across front pages. The quote burned into headlines. Finally, someone said it. Crockett's not playing games. In the chamber, Representative Wellner hadn't moved in nearly 5 minutes. Tease had tried to speak to him. He didn't respond. His eyes were locked forward. The cracks had become fractures. Bixler pressed his mic again. "Congresswoman, I'll admit the letter raises serious concerns, but it's still circumstantial. No one's proven the president directly authorized these accounts." Jasmine nodded. "Fair enough," she said. "Which is why I'd like to read a brief excerpt from a sworn deposition submitted yesterday." She opened a second folder. This is from Dr. Nens, the compliance officer whose audit we reviewed earlier. She read aloud while reviewing flagged transactions between February and June 2025. "I was directed via internal memo to remove entries under a project code labeled 45 Echo. The memo states that the directive came from the top of the executive office and names the president explicitly, citing the need for absolute discretion. No one spoke. No one dared." Jasmine looked up, so I'll say it again. If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. But if I'm right, then this isn't just about the president. It's about everyone who helped him do it. Outside the chamber, word had spread. Protesters were already gathering near the Capitol steps. Homemade signs, cell phones raised, flags waving. And Jasmine hadn't even finished. Some were chanting Crockett's name. Others stood silently, holding up photos of the documents she had introduced. America wasn't waiting anymore. Inside, the chairman looked worn out. "The committee will reconvene tomorrow morning for review of the new evidence. This session is adjourned." Crockett didn't move. She didn't speak again. She simply sat, hands folded, staring at nothing in particular, like someone waiting for the second shoe to drop. But behind the scenes, Trump's closest circle wasn't just reacting. They were beginning to turn on each other. At exactly 1:08 a.m., the doors to the private West Wing conference room swung shut. No cameras, no staffers. Just 5 people. Those who had stood closest to Donald Trump during his second term gathered around a long, polished table with tired eyes and frayed nerves. Trump sat at the head, arms folded, silent. Melania stood behind him, arms crossed, calm but alert. Across from them sat Harlan Breeze, former chief of staff, Winston Dre, Trump's longtime legal fixer, and Sylvia Keir, his media strategist. No one touched the water bottles. No one leaned back in their chairs. "She's not bluffing," Sylvia finally said, breaking the silence. "I've seen how Crockett operates. She's holding anything back. It's not hesitation. It's not hesitations. Pressure." Breeze glanced at Trump. "You told us those logs were scrubbed, sir?" Trump leaned forward, gravel in his voice. "They were. That woman has someone on the inside." Winston cleared his throat. He'd navigated Trump's legal fires for 2 decades. This one felt different. "We have to assume everything Project 45 Echo, the Cayman accounts, the Mar-a-Lago. Serverts all going public. She's not grandstanding. She's boxing us in." Trump stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, only floodlights lit the night. "I want names," he said. "Someone leaked that memo." Sylvia slid a folder toward him. It wasn't leaked. It was subpoenaed. Loretta Nunez didn't go rogue. She built a case quietly, which means she had help, possibly inside Treasury, maybe even from our own transition team. Melania spoke next, her voice cutting clean through the room. "This didn't happen overnight. Someone's been watching you for a long time. You were too focused on the midterms to see it." Trump turned to her, sharp but she didn't flinch. "So what now?" Breeze asked. "Wait for DOJ to knock on the door? Issue a blanket denial and hope the cycle moves on?" Winston shook his head. "That worked in 2021, not now. Too many Republicans are already cracking. Did you see Lanford's face? He looked ready to disappear." For the first time, Trump looked less angry and more worn. No one mentioned Barron, but Melania did. "You saw your son," she said. "He didn't react to rumors. He reacted because he recognized something. Maybe from overhearing calls, maybe from something you said. But he won't stay silent forever." Trump sat back down with force. "I'm not letting this family get dragged down because of some freshman congresswoman with a binder and a microphone." Sylvia blinked. "You're not just dealing with her. You're dealing with a country that saw your son unravel on live TV and then watched you do nothing." Winston added, "If even one major donor thinks you've lost control, the war chest dries up fast." Trump slammed the table. "So what? You all ready to jump ship? Go ahead. But don't pretend you didn't know what this job required." Silence. He looked around at them, some he'd trusted for years, others only long enough to win another election. And he saw it. Not loyalty, not strategy. Doubt. Breeze spoke again, low and serious. "There's still time to shape the story, but you can't stay silent. Go public. Blame bad advisors. Say it was a breakdown in oversight. Just shift the narrative before she makes you irrelevant." Trump stared. "You want me to look weak? I want you to look believable," Breeze said. "Or next week, we're not talking subpoenas, we're talking indictments." Melania left the room without a word. No one stopped her. But outside those walls, no one was waiting for a press release. They were already writing their own conclusions. By sunrise, the streets were stirring, not just with commuters, but with protests. In cities across the country, people gathered. Before dawn, holding signs, streaming live, marching toward courthouses, state buildings, and congressional offices. The clip of Crockett holding that redacted memo and declaring this isn't politics. This is protection had struck a nerve. And this time, the public wasn't shrugging it off. In Tucson, students and teachers lined the university promenade, holding printouts of the offshore routing logs. Protest flyers appeared in Pittsburgh as union workers marched downtown with 45 Echo is fraud stickers slapped across their work vests. In Fresno, a retired Marine named Kevin Dorman read Jasmine Crockett's deposition through a portable loudspeaker in front of City Hall, drawing in curious passersby. Across the country, scenes like this were unfolding. By 8 a.m., cable news headlines were shifting hourly. Protests erupt nationwide. Trump's inner circle splinters. Is 45 Echo the new Watergate? Even late-night comedians, fresh off the air, were launching impromptu live streams. One stared into his webcam and summed it up plainly. This isn't a leak. This is a woman showing up with receipts and asking, "Y'all ready to grow up and read?" In a Fort Collins bakery, Alice Langston was pouring coffee when she overheard a customer say, "I don't even like her politics, but at least she's not pretending." That sentiment echoed across the country. Americans who hadn't trusted Congress in years were suddenly glued to coverage of a freshman representative from Texas. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just trending, she was transforming into something larger. Artists turned her courtroom image into viral posters. One in particular, a shot of her holding the redacted memo in her navy blazer, was downloaded more than 2 million times within 12 hours. Meanwhile, President Trump's approval rating, once stable at 51%, took a sharp dive. Leaked internal polling from the National Republican Caucus showed a 19-point drop among suburban voters. The memo wasn't just controversial, it was resonating. Back in D.C., Crockett's office was overwhelmed. Her chief of staff, Rena Mills, had stopped trying to sort the flood of voicemails and emails. Death threats and media requests came in through the same inbox. "We've got 25 networks asking for an exclusive," Rena said, holding up a list. "Tell them no," Crockett replied, calmly sipping her coffee. "All of them. I'm not doing this for a headline. Let the documents speak. The rest will come." Even as Capitol Police doubled her security and warned her not to travel alone, Crockett held her ground. In a public school classroom in Tempe, Arizona, a government teacher played clips from the hearing, then asked his students if the president should respond directly. Every single hand went up. Conservative radio split down the middle. Older hosts blamed the deep state, but younger voices warned. This isn't 2016. People aren't laughing, they're paying attention. Behind closed doors, a subtle but significant shift was taking place inside GOP offices. Staffers scrubbed old press releases, donors froze transfers, and political consultants stopped returning calls from the White House. It wasn't necessarily about guilt. It was about how the perception of guilt was winning. And at the center of the storm stood Jasmine Crockett, not raising her voice, not pointing fingers, but presenting documents no one could ignore. "I'm not trying to be famous," she told a local radio station that afternoon. "I just don't think the American people should be the last to know." But fame was already finding her hand with it came mounting pressure on the White House. By late Friday, the Capitol wasn't buzzing with reporters, but humming with tension. The halls were filled with rushed footsteps, quiet phone calls, and the unmistakable air of a political machine realizing it may have lost control of the narrative. Something had shifted and there was no turning back. Jasmine Crockett had just arrived for a closed door follow-up session with key oversight members. She hadn't said a word yet, but her very presence drew attention. Outside, the press no longer shouted questions, they waited, silently calculating what might come next. Inside the chamber, the mood had changed. The room was smaller. Several Republican members who had attended yesterday's explosive hearing hadn't returned. The absence didn't go unnoticed, not by the staff and not by the media at the door. Rena Mills kept checking her phone. Sources had just confirmed, anonymously and to multiple outlets, that a preliminary investigation was now officially open, and Crockett hadn't even spoken yet. Across the building, Representative Kessa, longtime Trump ally, resigned from the committee with no fanfare. No press conference, just a letter quietly handed to a staffer and a quick exit through a side door. He didn't want to walk past Crockett's office. Even veteran insiders could feel it. This wasn't just noise anymore. This was momentum. When Jasmine entered the conference room, silence fell. She placed her files down, took her seat, and nodded to the chairman. "Before we begin," he said, "you should know the DOJ is likely to request full unredacted files within 24 hours. And they're moving faster than anyone expected." She nodded. "They should have moved 3 years ago." A staffer handed her a folder. Inside was a formal letter from Attorney General Leighton Hayes, requesting her cooperation in a confidential pre-indictment review. She read it twice, then slid it back. "They'll get everything I have, but I'm not hiding behind closed doors. The public saw this live. They deserve the rest, too." Meanwhile, in a small Nebraska town outside Omaha, a man named Trent Vocal sat on his porch with a worn-out MAGA hat in hand. 63 years old, voted for Trump twice, donated in the last election. Now he sat quietly, watching hearing clips on his iPad. His daughter stepped out and asked, "You okay?" He didn't look up, just said, "Didn't think she'd be the one to break it open." But she's not wrong. Across the Potomac, the White House remained silent. The press had been relocated twice. Trump hadn't made a public appearance since his late-night strategy meeting, and Barron hadn't been seen since the broadcast moment that still hadn't been addressed. That silence, it was starting to echo, louder than anything Crockett had said. In a dimly lit restaurant in Des Moines, 3 high-profile GOP donors met for dinner. None of them ordered. They were too focused on what to do next. One, the youngest, tapped his glass and said, "It's over." Charges or not, people saw her pull back the curtain. They won't forget it. Back on Capitol Hill, Jasmine exited the chamber. Security flanked her. Cameras flashed. "Congresswoman, do you believe the president will be indicted? Will you testify if DOJ asks? Are you afraid for your safety?" She didn't answer. Not then. But just before stepping into her car, she paused, turned toward a camera. "I'm not afraid. I've seen worse than paper trails. This isn't about being brave. It's about telling the truth before someone else rewrites it." That clip went viral to dot at DOJ headquarters. Internal memos circulated assigning case leads to track financial trails tied to the Cayman Islands. The term 45 Echo had been flagged in their system for months. But until now, no one had drawn the connections. Behind closed doors, GOP strategists scrambled. Some drafted defenses. Others urged patience. "Wait for the facts," they said. But the facts weren't hiding. They had already been read aloud on live television as her car pulled away. Crockett stared out the window. Quiet, reflective. Rena leaned from the passenger seat. "You think they'll spin this into just another witch hunt?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "Of course they will. But it's too late for spin when people have already made up their minds." What no one, perhaps, not even Jasmine, fully realized, though, was that the shift wasn't coming from Washington anymore. It was coming from kitchen tables, classrooms, church parking lots, places where people were starting to think for themselves again. 4 days later, Jasmine Crockett sat across from journalist Leah Brinkman in a modest interview space outside Philadelphia. No glam team, no studio lights, just 2 chairs, 1 mic, 1 camera. The stream drew over 3 million live viewers. Leah leaned forward. "You've been called a disruptor, a threat, a hero, a problem solver. How do you see yourself?" Jasmine paused, took a breath, then calmly said, "None of those. I'm just someone who paid attention when others didn't. No slogans, no applause lines, just truth." And people were finally listening. "What pushed you to go forward with the hearing?" Leah asked. Jasmine didn't look at hers. She looked straight into the camera. Because I got tired of watching people lie on paper in public and pretend the rest of us didn't see it. You can't ask people to trust institutions when the people inside them are playing games with the truth. You can't demand loyalty to a flag while stealing behind the curtain. In Austin, a high school history teacher paused the clip in class. This, he said, pointing to the screen, is what accountability looks like. It didn't come from a podium. It came from someone in the middle row who just got tired of being quiet. On a radio station in Detroit, a caller named Carmen broke down crying. She reminds me of my grandmother, she said. She never raised her voice either, but she always told the truth, just like Jasmine. Back in the interview, Leah asked, "Do you think there's still time to repair what's broken?" Jasmine paused. Then, that depends on us, on what we're willing to forgive, on what we demand next. But let me say this. Secrecy is the currency of the powerful. Transparency is what the people are owed. That night, the DOJ confirmed it. A special counsel had been appointed. Subpoenas started flying. Jasmine boarded a flight back to Dallas. Her district was waiting. But so was the rest of the country. At the gate, a woman in her 70s stepped up. Faded blazer, worn purse, steady voice. "I watched you," she said. "I didn't think anyone would speak up again. Not after all these years." Jasmine smiled gently. "What made you think that?" The woman shook her head. "Because the truth stopped mattering for a while. But maybe, maybe it's coming back." Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't need to. In Charlotte College, students launched a voter registration drive. #TruthBeforeTribes in Kansas City. A church hosted a session on whistleblower protections. They used Jasmine's hearing as the case study in Portland. 2 city council members opposite parties co-wrote a letter. Read every page of her evidence before you form an opinion. This wasn't just a political ripple. It was personal. People weren't just asking, "Is Trump guilty?" They were asking, "What else have we been told to ignore?" When Jasmine returned to her district, a crowd was waiting. Not to protest, to thank her. Students, seniors, activists, lawyers, strangers. Not looking for a quote, just wanting to shake her hand. She didn't give a speech. She didn't take the mic. She stood quietly, letting the moment breathe. Because the lesson wasn't about left or right. It wasn't about legacy. It was about the weight of truth. What it costs to tell it. What it costs to ignore it. Here's the takeaway. Silence only protects the guilty. And the longer you stay quiet, the harder it becomes to speak when it really matters. So maybe now is the time to ask better questions, to demand better answers. Because courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it reads the fine print and refuses to look away. If this meant something to you, share it. Talk about it. Carry it. Truth only survives when we carry it together.